What makes you afraid? Some of All Fear lives at the crossroads between our greatest phobias and the horror movies we love to experience. Part pop culture and part psychology. It's time to find out why we're all so scared of the dark.
Were you ewing at the images of things you should not masturbate to?
Yeah, one of my favorite classic storybooks.
It's not storybook, it's a picture book.
Well, it is a picture book.
And it's just images that you should not masturbate to.
Honestly, there's not even there's not an author or anything. There's not anybody that says that they're responsible for this instead of
it's just, just exists.
Except Penguin Books. So no one wants to take responsibility, but
for the book, images you should not masturbate to.
This is great. There's a bunch of logs that have been sawed.
That's very trypophobic.
In concentric circles.
Yeah. Going along with our phobia for today, which is going to be an exciting one because this one has excited more reaction on the social media than any phobia we've done so far. That's for sure.
Do you think it's because of the iPhone 11? Probably.
No, I don't think so. I think people are just, I think it's become such a phenomenon and people are so aware of it and they have all kind of,
thanks, internet,
relate to it. A lot of people relate to it. I'm starting to relate to it. I didn't think it was something that I had.
No, I know. The other day
developed.
When we went out to dinner, you were like,
I was nauseous because I was looking at too many
trypophobic images.
And I'm
just,
yeah, for sure.
So we'll talk about why that is. I have some important information.
There is a reason.
I have a PSA for you on trypophobic images.
Well, welcome back, Feardos. We are the Sum of All Fear podcast, the show that talks about real life phobias from a mental health perspective. And then we pair those fears up with horror movies that prey on them, on those fears. Fun concept, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm Drew, writer and horror nerd, and this is my deliciously intelligent wife.
Oh, hello.
Kris, a mental health therapist.
You could just stopped at mental.
A professional mental.
A professional mental. That's the one thing I can take pride in. I am professionally mental.
Well, I think
in many ways.
The field tends to attract the people that understand it the most, right?
From a very, very deep personal perspective, yes.
Well, you know what, Kris?
No, what?
I've heard we're being called the Jeff Goldblum and Gina Davis of podcasting.
Ooh, which one of us is Jeff Goldblum?
Which is fun. Well, I hope it's me.
I want to be Jeff Goldblum.
Which
I like
is
him.
Fun because they not only starred in my favorite Cronenberg movie that we're going to be talking about a little bit today, The Fly, but they also were married from 1993 to 1997. Fun fact.
And then what happened?
And then they parted ways.
Oh,
yeah. We've already beat their marriage though.
That's true. Hey, high five us.
We beat Jeff Goldblum and Gina Davis.
What's going to happen to the 7-year itch with us?
I don't know.
Oh man.
I don't know. We've been together for like 8 years though. So
no, 8 years,
8.5. So we're on the kind of the other side of that, right?
I don't know.
In a way. I mean,
there's always time for an itch.
I like you. I think I'm planning on sticking around for a little while.
Like you.
As long as you'll let me.
Yeah, that's right.
Saw some movies this week.
You did?
We watched the new. You watched some of it. I think you fell asleep through most of it, but
as is customary.
Hell House, the
LLC.
Hell House 3, Lake of Fire. I think.
So I didn't understand it because I didn't watch the other.
It did connect a lot with the other first two. It was new on Shudder this week.
You kind of liked it.
I enjoyed it. You have to take it for what it is. It's not like a super high budget movie. They connected the dots with the first and the second one, which I just thought was fun. It was fun. I enjoyed it. It was a good time. I also went and saw Three
on
from
a
Hell
mandate
with my buddy D, who I have not hung out with in quite a while.
I know. So good to see D.
So that was cool. I posted up and was like, hey, does anybody want to come with me? Because they were only doing the 3-day run, right? So Monday, they had.
Did you see they extended that, right?
They did have one extra. They're adding one extra day because it did well. But yeah, Rob Zombie, they released it only Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday this week. And first day was you get a free poster. Second day was behind the scenes, extra footage. And then the third day was a double feature with Devil's Rejects. And I can only make it out the third day. So we went out on Wednesday and saw it. And it was pretty fun. I had a good time. We the place was packed and was packed full of fans. And, Rob Zombie is kind of a polarizing
Sure. Figurehead
dude in the horror community, which I don't pay attention to a lot of that shit. So I don't really get it. Cause to me, he just does his thing. Rob Zombie movies are Rob Zombie movies. Like you have to go in kind of expecting what you're going to expect. But I had a blast, and I thought they had a really, they didn't get Sid Haig in there much because he apparently, like 3 weeks before filming, he was in the hospital.
He's been very ill,
and he's just been in poor health. And Rob Zombie went and visited him and was like,
"Don't worry about it,
you're not going to be able to do this, bud. Like, this is just not going to happen." So he only had a couple of little kind of cameo flashback type things throughout the movie. And then, but they did fill his character in a way with a new character named Foxy, played by Richard Brake, which was really good. I liked him a lot. It was super, super, super fun. Even though Captain Spaulding was missing, I think they did a good job with kind of recasting a cool
also
character.
A clown?
No, not a clown. He was like a half brother or a cousin or something, and they were on the run together.
Gotcha.
I don't know if they were. I don't remember.
Loosely
if they
connected,
they were
not like.
Yeah, I think they busted out of jail together or something.
Gotcha. Well, if they were in jail together, what happened.
So it was. You
cool.
know
why they're close.
It was cool. It was a really fun. It was a fun flick. I really enjoyed it. What else did I watch this week? We watched Tigers Are Not Afraid.
I didn't watch that. You did.
On Shudder.
Looks like a great concept, but not super well
it was
executed.
It has been it has been lauded as like one of the best films of the year. Like every critic is just over the moon about it.
There's a lot of movies coming out with tigers in the title. There's a movie called Paper Tigers about an educational about a behavioral educational school in Washington that was set up in one of the regions that I work in, and that was one of the movies. There's a lot of tigers movies.
Yeah, I don't know. People were really excited about this movie and have been just talking about how wonderful it is. It was a really, really, really good, really well put together movie. It had visually, it was really stunning, and it had some amazing. There were amazing moments in it, but I just never got real sucked into it. Like I never got real connected to it. I felt like it was Pan's Labyrinth, but not as well done in a way.
Not as moving.
So that's just me though. I mean, I have I guarantee on the second watch, I'll probably appreciate it more. Maybe it was just the headspace I was in, because it was kind of it's a heavy movie too.
And if you were on and off your phone at all, you would have missed dialogue.
Yeah, I mean, it's subtitled, but which is fine. But and I watched it pretty intently, but it just, I don't know, maybe I was in the wrong headspace, but it just didn't blow me away. I think a lot of people, it was like, oh my gosh, this movie is incredible, and I was just like, it's kind of like Pan's Labyrinth, but just not quite as good.
I still need to see all of Pan's Labyrinth.
Oh, it's so good, so good. But we have to call out a new Feardo.
We absolutely have to.
We had a really, really nice shout out on Twitter this week from a new Feardo named Cody from Iowa.
The best Cody.
The best Cody.
The best Cody. The best Cody. The best Cody.
We're really sad that we have, and we need to apologize to Codys everywhere, because there are so many good Codys.
There really are.
And I don't know, I don't know if Cody, if you've listened to the anti-Cody episode.
But it was Cody spelled with a C-U-N-T.
Which is a really interesting spelling of Cody.
It is. That's why you have to pay attention. It's a select few.
So we apologize for our Cody bashing, and you have redeemed Codys everywhere. Cody from Iowa.
He's an IE too. I like that. That's
we really appreciate
unique.
IE. So I hope it's not Kodai.
Kodai. It might be Kodai.
I like that.
That would be really rad.
I kind of like the we may just call you that. And although that may be something that's triggering from your childhood, from people pronouncing your name wrong.
And it was especially special because the awesomest Cody had just started listening to podcasts, and we were one of the first ones he kind of stumbled onto.
Yeah. I'll read his review. He said at Some of All Fear Pod, you guys make my days at work 10 times easier, and the day just flies by. I'm pretty new to podcasts, and yours was one of the first I gave a try, and now I'm addicted to it. I can't wait for more podcasts to come from you guys.
We are so happy to stroke your love of podcasts.
Yeah, it warmed the cuckles of my
your feel balls.
my pea picking heart.
Your pea picking heart?
That's an old Tennessee Ernie Ford song.
I really appreciate it, though. Thank you so much for getting feared up with us, Cody. And just know that when we talk about Cody's, it's not about you.
That's right. And just like our new Feardo friend, Cody, if you like the show, we'd love to get to know you on social media. So come join the conversation at Some of All Fear Podcast on Facebook and at Some of All Fear Pod on Twitter and Instagram. And if the spirit moves you, you can support us on Patreon like our awesome Feardo friends, James from the Eek Channel podcast. Please check it out. It's badass and full of fun horror movie goodness. And you know what? James is from Fort Wayne, Indiana. Did you know that?
No, I didn't.
Yeah. When I was living in Chicago, I managed a band that used to stop at the Brass Rail in Fort Wayne, Indiana. That was a club. I think it's still there. Kind of a dive bar, club that had a stage. That was a cool place. So I don't know if James has ever hung out at the Brass Rail, but
if so, let us know.
Yeah, I had some good drunken times there. And also our Feardo friend Toby from McKinney, Texas, is also a Patreon supporter, and we really appreciate her support as well.
Yes, we do.
And yeah, so all of our awesome Feardo Patreon friends, we appreciate you. And of course, guys, please go to your podcast apps and give us a rating and a review. We really could use them. They really help push this thing forward. Right now, we still are about the same amount of reviews and ratings that we've had for a couple of months. So we would love to see, especially on Apple Podcasts. It's really important. If you have an Apple iPhone, just go and just hit the star button and scroll down and give us a quick little blurb. It really helps a lot, and it helps further this whole deal and
help get the Feardo name out there.
Yeah, it gets our podcast into. If you don't know what it does, it actually they use algorithms, right? So if they see people getting a lot of ratings, then they push the podcast into their little search engine, so it pops up higher, and their little.
It's all about the maths.
Yeah, it's all about getting things out there and publicizing it more. Well, let's test your brain levels.
My brain levels.
Your brain levels.
They're so low this week.
Are you ready to play a game?
Let's do it.
You ready to play a game, Kris?
I'm ready.
What?
I don't know.
Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready.
I said I wasn't going to say that.
I'm ready.
I'm not going to say, am I ready? And I'm not going to say
dive in.
I'm going to try to.
If you guys hear that, you have to take a shot of whatever you're drinking at the moment.
I've been repeating too many of the same phrases.
So you're all 8 or 10 behind at least now.
Shall we play a game, Kris?
Shall we?
All right,
shall.
It's time for the world's greatest phobia-based trivia game.
What the fear? You say it now.
What the fear?
There you go. Okay, you have to say it like that.
All right, well, it's that time of the week.
Oh, it's that time of the week
where we talk about phobias.
Yeah.
That we give the phobia's name, and we give a little hint about the phobia, and then you have to guess what that is a fear of.
I try my best. Last week we did a Stephen King version of What the Fear, didn't we?
2 weeks ago.
Holy.
Yes, because we skipped a week.
Last episode
we did, and I did trivia, Stephen King trivia, which
right.
I really enjoyed. I wouldn't mind just doing Stephen King trivia every time. I think that would be a blast.
There's not that much out there,
Oh my gosh!
I mean, I'm sure there's
so much stuff.
Not that much out there that would be.
Oh my gosh, it'd be so
challenging for you.
Baloney. I would love that. But let's get back to our normal fear-based trivia game here. I'm not gonna say, are you ready? Hold on. Back it up. Do you want to play the game now? Let's rephrase.
Are you able to commence?
Are you able to commence with this brain tickling endeavor we have going on here?
Yes, tickle my brain, please. Commence.
All right, your first word is anuptophobia.
Ooh.
Anuptophobia. ANUPTA phobia. Anuptophobia.
Can I take a stab at it before you even tell me a fact?
Sure. Go for it.
Fear of getting married.
Oh, you are in the ballpark, but not quite.
Oh, okay. Now I need. Okay.
Not quite there, but definitely in the ballpark. Good job. Way to nail those roots there.
Yeah, I'm trying.
Yeah, it's funny because sometimes I write these down and I don't pronounce them, but then when I pronounce them, I go,
You're like,
that sounds a lot like that.
Yeah.
That might give it away. All right. Well, when an anuptophobic breaks up with someone, they're going to load up their phone with Bumble, Tinder, Christian Mingle, Farmers Only, and any other dating app they can get their hands on, especially Farmers Only.
Fear of being alone?
Close. I'll give it to you. Fear of staying single.
Fear of staying single, fear of being alone.
It's similar. But fear of staying single is anuptophobia.
Anuptophobia.
Anuptophobia. Yeah. Fear of nuptials. Basically.
Fear of nuptials.
No, wait, no, not fear of nuptials. That'd be the fear of getting married.
Right.
Yeah, which is what I
Which
was.
is what
that's
I
probably
thought.
what I would have said too. Yeah.
Which is why I was like, ooh, let me see if I can get this one. Okay. That was good.
Yeah. That's an
Gosh,
interesting one.
I know a few.
I know a lot of people like that.
A few anuptophobics. I mean,
there's a few of you listening as well.
But though, myself, a lot of my life, I was kind of like afraid of being alone.
Yeah.
Or
I've
afraid
never
of
had
being
a time.
single.
I've never really had any extended time of being single since I've been of dating age. I don't think. I don't think I've gone more than like.
I did the intentional singleness.
Yeah, but you weren't really single that time.
Yeah,
during that period of time
for like 3 months. Really bad at it.
Yeah.
But I'm not phobic of it. Although I do believe that was one of the things on my CDs that I always talk about, that I named a CD like fear of being alone or something like that. I got to find those. I swear to you, they're in my closet. Anyways, go ahead.
Number 2.
I am prepared to commence.
Are you prepared to commence the brain tickling? Enetophobia. ENETO phobia. Enetophobia.
It's not a fear of Entenmann's products.
It is not a fear of Entenmann's products. Entenmann's products are delicious. I particularly liked their coffee cake. My buddy growing up, my best friend growing up, his dad was a delivery driver for Entenmann's. For like whatever the company was, Ora Wheat and Entenmann's that all were connected together. And so he always had like
the backstock,
just like all the backstock, whatever was probably like the coded out stuff.
Yeah. Stuff you couldn't sell.
And so at his house, I'd just be like, oh man, like coffee cake and freaking powdered donuts and
powdered donuts.
All right. So enetophobia. Here's your clue. Albert Fish, our good friend Albert Fish, definitely didn't have this phobia. That man liked a good prick. Her head just shot up. Like what?
Now I have to.
Albert Fish definitely didn't have this phobia. He liked a good prick. Mm-hmm. The wheels are turning.
Are we talking about?
I can see her brain tickling as we speak.
Are we talking about? Is this?
There's no follow-up questions to this. This is use your.
I'm trying to think if Albert Fish was one of those. I'm going in 2 different directions in my mind. I'm trying to think if Albert Fish was one of those serial killers that like to insert things into his penis, like needles and stuff, or if it's going in more of a direction of, like his sexual preference, or if it's going in a direction of, did he like to eat people?
You're going to have,
because I forgot what he did.
Well, I will give you a little tip right here.
A little tip?
It was actually all 3. A little tip. A little tip.
A little tight. He
liked all 3.
He is not afraid of male genitalia.
He is not. No.
Yeah.
Was that your guess?
Yeah. So it's the fear of male genitalia.
You were actually on the right path. Before that is the fear of pins. Because
Damn.
Albert Fish is the one.
He is the one that put it in there.
We saw the X-ray.
Okay, I was trying to think.
We saw his X-ray at the
Museum of
Death in New Orleans. They had the X-ray of Albert Fish, of his groin, and he had 28 needles stuck in there, or 63 or something like that. Number. He liked to just insert needles into like the tip of his penis and like into his groin and like all over the place.
There's that case at Renown that keeps recurring.
Oh, we don't know if we can even talk about that.
Oh, somebody else broke HIPAA on that. But yeah, so I was trying to reason.
So he definitely does not have a fear of pins.
Did he also eat people?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I was right with all 3.
He's the one who made the recipe book. Okay. We talked about that last episode.
Because I was trying to think. I was like,
we were talking about House of 1,000 Corpses.
He can't be the one that did that too. Like I was trying to figure out.
The original name for Pennywise was it something Gray?
Yeah,
Bob Gray.
Or something like that.
Was an alias that Albert Fish used. as well. So
damn, I was trying to wrap it all up and see if I was remembering him as the same person or if those were 3 different people. Because how I am with names.
He did some sexual abusing of children, and he also did some eating of children, and he also put a lot of pins in his body. He was just
all
really
over the
man.
place. Wow.
Yeah.
Top notch, terrible person.
He really was the like people who haven't heard of him, like research Albert Fish if you like to research the serial killer.
If you like what you've heard so far.
if you enjoy what you've heard so far.
Please also look up the Toy Box Killer. That's an interesting one as well.
Oh man, he's the worst.
He is brutal. I feel like he is the crux for me.
One of the most underrated,
underrated,
Like, people don't know the Toy Box Killer. At least I didn't. He was one of the last ones that I
Google that fucker.
Yeah, Google that fucker. All right. Your third one. Well done. 1 for 2.
Ready to commence.
You were on the right path in the beginning of that one and then kind of diverted. So 1 for 2. Let's go on to our next. Let's commence with our next word.
Proceed.
Proceed. Gerontophobia. Geronto phobia. Gerontophobia. This will probably be an easy one.
Is it fear of old people?
Sure is. I had a feeling after I wrote it, I was like, you know what? I think this one's going to be an easy one.
I was like,
I was going to say the apartment scene. The apartment scene in It Chapter 2 definitely brought out my latent gerontophobia.
It was either
honestly, like I didn't realize I had gerontophobia until I saw that movie, and that scene really freaked me out.
Are you afraid of old people?
I think I might be.
I know that when I had you fill out those little jars of fears, you did put fear of getting old.
Yeah, maybe there's something there. I don't know.
Oh, we need to explore that further.
Yeah, we have to post that up. That was a cool little thing. So it was like all these fears, little jars, and then you fill them up, and then you post it up how much of your jar is full on each of the topics. So it's like snakes and spiders, and we need to post that up on our social media.
We will.
Well, let's move on and dive in. Nope. No diving.
Nope. Reframe.
No diving.
Reframe.
What are we going to
Are we going to
dissect?
Are we going to leap into it? Are we going to jaunt into it?
We're going to slice open.
Are we going to murder?
We're going to press into tiny little holes. We're going to kneel down on rocks until our knees have a pattern. We're going to look into our next phobia that we're going to break down today
instead of diving.
It is probably
it's
way more common than I thought it was. It's super interesting. We had when we first started this podcast, our good friend Lacey the Contrarian said, "I totally have this phobia." I think we may have brought it up briefly in an episode, and I had never heard of it before. I didn't know what it was. I was really totally in the dark, and I've been really interested in researching this one. It's been so fascinating. So let's talk about the fear of, what do we want to call it? The fear of, I just call it the fear of holes, but
I think it's small holes, small concentric shapes closely grouped together, but that doesn't roll off the tongue.
Also bumps come in
Any small concentric shapes closely grouped together, but it doesn't roll off the tongue.
Does not create for an easy episode title.
Figure it out, marketing expert.
So we're going to call it the fear of holes, trypophobia. Hey, Kris.
Hey, Drew.
Have you ever thought about starting your own podcast?
Why, yes, I have.
When we were trying to get this podcast off the ground, we had a lot of questions. Like, how do I record an episode? How do I get my show into all the apps people like to listen to? How do we make money podcasting? The answer to every one of these questions is really simple. Anchor. Anchor is a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing your podcast. And best of all, it's 100% free and ridiculously easy to use. And now, Anchor can match you with great sponsors who want to advertise on your podcast. That means you can get paid to podcast right away. In fact, that's what I'm doing right now just by reading this ad.
Right now?
Right now.
Right now.
Right now.
Right now?
That means if you want to get a podcast going and make money doing it, go to anchor.fm/start. Join me and Kris and the diverse community of podcasters already using Anchor. That's anchor.fm/start. We can't wait to hear your podcast.
Short person issues.
Easy there, fuzzy little man Peach.
You have a drunk Baileys from a shoe?
You have a drunk Baileys from a shoe? I just put Baileys in my coffee, and every time I see Baileys, I think of old Greg. So trypophobia. This has been a long-awaited episode. I've been looking forward to this one.
Yeah, everybody is looking forward to it being over so that we stop posting images.
Stop posting
that are
the images online. Yeah, there's a lot of people who are a little bit upset at us this week. Like a little bit like,
I get it.
Ha, 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 but but seriously, stop.
I understand it, but we're all leaning into this together.
We got to lean into it, man.
We got to lean into our fears.
We are a show about fear.
Sometimes we have to just do it afraid.
Well, and what's funny is, if you're a listener to this show and you follow us on social media, eventually we're going to touch on something that is as a fear,
guaranteed,
like an actual fear of yours. And so, yeah, you got to be ready for it, man.
That's
It's interesting. This was a term, trypophobia, that really was an internet phenomenon,
which is insane.
Yeah, around 2005, it became a big social media thing. Where
were you in 2005?
2005, I was finishing up my last year of college.
2005, I was finishing up
your last year
of
high school.
First year of college.
First year of college. That's right. Yeah. So, and I honestly I was never a big Reddit guy. I was never like on
me either.
The forums and stuff as much.
4chan.
And this kind of fleshed out through the. Ooh, hello. I think I swallowed a fly. I think I might die. There was no lady who swallowed a fly. I don't know why she swallowed a fly. I guess she'll die. But this was really a social media phenomenon, and people started posting up images, right, of these types of things, and started getting like responses back, and people were like, "Oh my gosh, like I have this. This is weird. I don't like this.
This is disgusting."
And then it kind of like evolved where people realized it was worse when it was superimposed onto flesh. So like somebody photoshops it onto skin or onto a face or onto a hand or onto an arm, and people were like, oh man, it's way worse when it's on skin too. But it started with this like the seed thing, right? We got this what is it called?
The lotus seed.
The lotus seed, right? Everybody sees this. That's one of the first images you pop up when you look up trypophobia. And then honeycombs are really big. So you've got honeycombs, you've got this like lotus seed, you've got these kind of naturally occurring things in nature.
And animal prints. Think animal prints.
Animal prints.
Cheetahs have, snakes. Circular zebras even. It might not be circles, but it is geometric shapes that are in high contrast.
Right. And so this just started inciting an
instinctual reaction.
Something that made people go, eh. Like, I don't like that. Let's talk about real quick the word itself. So the person that came up with this said that they just basically looked up the word for holes in Greek, which was trypos, which is also a fun. Whoa!
Oh, you're doing it this week.
I just knocked my microphone because I was pointing. Trypos is also a Greek slang for buttholes, which is a fun fact for you to take home.
Put that in your back pocket, folks.
Yeah, put that in your butthole.
Call your boss a trypos.
Trypos, yeah. Trypophobia basically is an aversion to the sight of irregular patterns, clusters, small holes, bumps. Again, not officially recognized as a mental disorder, as a number of phobias are not. But they fall into the broad category of specific phobia. And it's a fear that's excessive and distressing for a lot of people. So, there's always this conversation about what is a phobia? Is it really a phobia? Is it not a phobia? That kind of thing. And
well, let's talk about why it is and is not. So here's the thing. In the DSM, or the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual, version 5, the recent version. DSM-5, as it here shall to 4 be referred to as.
Yeah, you really have to say the whole thing. Gosh, that's pretentious.
Right.
DSM-5.
So the DSM-5 only has official diagnostic criteria available for 4 categories of phobias. So we've got animal phobias, blood and injection phobias, situational phobias like flying, and then we've got specific phobias, other category. And the reason this is because of a lack of or a limited amount of research to be able to uncategorize additional phobias and put them into one of those more specific categories. So when we say this is not really a phobia, what we mean is there's not enough research out there for us to be able to say this is good enough to write down in a book and say, this portion of the population has this.
Somebody hasn't spent a lot of time studying it,
right.
and researching
And
it. So if I say I have a fear of cowboy hats, there's just, I can genuinely have that phobia.
Yeah.
And it's a legitimate phobia. It just hasn't been, it hasn't been researched enough. There hasn't been enough academic papers written and evaluated and
research done on the impacts and the effects on daily life and things like that. So it doesn't mean that you can't suffer from a phobic reaction of this, because that phobia is the anxiety, right? And we all have anxiety reactions. It just means that the freaking manual doesn't have it specifically listed, because in order to get into the manual, you have to have proof that you're a thing. And just because it's not in there doesn't mean it's not a thing. Right.
So for all
just
you
means there's
amateur,
no research.
All of you amateur idiots, I'm talking to you right now that are on Reddit going, it's not a real phobia. You're a fucking blah, blah, blah. This is so stupid. Just suck it up. Blah, blah. It doesn't matter whether it's specifically listed in the DSM-5. It doesn't make it any less real. You're an asshole.
Shut up.
Shut up.
That's period. Like you think you know everything, you don't.
Phobia is an irrational fear of anything.
So
yes, it's a phobia
that causes distress and impairment in daily functioning so great that it impedes you from being able to live your everyday life. So I don't care if it's a fear of a comet striking you. That's not in the DSM either. But guess what? It's a valid fear if that's that person's experience and it causes that significant impairment and distress in their lives.
Absolutely.
So shove it.
So don't let anybody tell you that your phobia is not a real phobia.
You be afraid of what you're afraid of.
Be afraid of whatever you want.
Yeah.
To, damn it.
Here, we do not put down any fears. You can be afraid of whatever you want.
And I have an interesting quote for this too. Arnold Wilkins, who's a professor emeritus at the University of Essex in the UK, has done some research on this. And he said this about trypophobia. He said, phobias are usually described as an irrational and persistent fear of certain objects or situations, and causes of such fears can sometimes be difficult to identify. Mm-hmm. Trypophobia is just that, except it's a more complex concept even.
Super.
With a cause that's not as simple to pinpoint as something like arachnophobia,
right?
Where it's easy to attribute one's fear to spiders or anything to do with spiders. This one's more complicated.
Right.
Why is that? Why is it more complicated?
Well, it's more complicated because it is so broad. Like it's the fear associated with a reaction upon the sight of something. And I would be very interested to know or find out if there's any research on folks who have limited sight, whether or not this phobia can translate through other senses like touch
or touch
or hearing, hearing concentric bumps or, something like that.
Feeling it, I'm sure.
Feeling
it would be really
it,
on your, just feeling
I'm
it,
wondering,
rubbing your hand across it.
I'm wondering if the brain reaction would be the same, kind of understanding this as something that could possibly be threatening based on how it feels, just as much as how it looks. Because that's a lot of what I've read on kind of something that the brain is prompted by with this particular phobia, is it has a lot to do with vision.
A lot of people describe it as a feeling of disgust.
Yeah.
So that, that they feel this visceral reaction to it that makes them feel nauseous or makes them feel gross and the reaction online, even this week when I was posting them,
it was great. It was all like the barf face.
It's the barfy emoji a lot. The barfy emoji and the like disgust,
like, oh no.
right? Like, bleh. What is it about it that makes us feel like that? That seems like that kind of ties into what this Dr. Wilkins was saying, Professor Wilkins, that there's something deeper. It's more complex.
Yeah.
It causes something within us. What is that about?
So what you said was correct. Disgust and fear. Those two concepts are very closely at play here. They occur in separate pieces of the brain. So the reaction that we get from seeing something that makes us afraid or something disgust comes from the autonomic nervous system, or otherwise known as like the automatic or the involuntary nervous system, right? So we've got this nervous system whose job is to involuntarily react for us and communicate kind of directly with the brain on what we should do with things very rapidly. Within the autonomic nervous system, we have two subsets of a nervous system. One is the sympathetic nervous system, which is, you can think of that as like the gas, right? The get going, get moving, get out of here, the flee, the fight nervous system. Whereas the parasympathetic nervous system is the calm fight or flight
part. Yeah. So both, right? So
yes.
that's what triggers both of those. Yeah.
Right. Whereas the other system is the parasympathetic nervous system, which is more of the break. It's the withdraw, get away, make yourself small. It's that calm down nervous system, right? Why this is important is because the accelerator is where we see fear. We see the sympathetic nervous system being active in the amygdala, which is a very emotional response center in this automatic nervous system. So fear very closely associated with emotions, which is why we can see something we love 10 times and see something we hate once, and that the amount that we feel on the something we hate or the something that we fear is 10 times more powerful,
is stronger
than anything else, because it is so closely tied with emotion. Now, in the same autonomic nervous
emotion,
system,
and probably also just instinct as far as being able to like
that protect
brain. Oneself, right?
Yeah, that lizard
which
brain
is really important,
reaction,
which is what our bodies geared towards, like we need to protect ourselves.
Absolutely. It's an automatic thing. And that's why this nervous system that's what its entire goal is, to either accelerate us out of something that is dangerous or slow us down so that we can get away from something safely. Like, you don't want to run away from a rattlesnake. You want to stop and back slowly away because you don't want to startle it. And that's those different nervous systems kind of at play, telling you how you need to kind of escape this potential threat.
I heard one under a rock a few weeks ago.
You didn't tell me this.
This is when I was out at the lake in Elko.
Oh,
and I went by a rock and heard the rattle. And I was like right about to step over that rock.
Nope.
And I heard it loud enough to go, ooh, and I did the same. I did exactly what you
just said. Freeze?
I just froze.
And then back slowly away, right?
And we're in rattlesnake country, so you have to always be aware. I mean, even in our own backyard, we could have one.
Because the other reaction is to jump and to leap, or to quickly get away.
But you would immediately know that's a sign of
a threat.
Something it could harm me.
And think about the shape of the rattles on a rattlesnake.
Yeah,
they are concentric because it's unnerving for our brain to process. And so here is where the difference between fear and disgust kind of barely separates, and they operate in kind of different areas of the brain, because that parasympathetic nervous system, that disgust reaction really occurs in the anterior insula of the brain, which is an entirely different region than the amygdala and serves different functions. However, they're very closely tied. So you can have a very closely tied disgust reaction as well as a fear response. Because they are so very automatic, and they do serve very similar functions, which is to save us from something that could potentially be harmful, right?
To protect ourselves.
So this reaction is difficult to study. First off, because a lot of folks don't seek treatment for it because it's more bothersome than it is. It's more of a get that away from me than it is
holy shit, I'm scared, I'm going to stay in my house.
Or like a panic hindrance, right?
Which, I mean, it can be, but I mean, it could be either. I'm sure it can.
You could have those reactions, absolutely. But to have it severe enough to where you seek treatment for it, it would have to be pretty intense. So we don't see that a whole lot, but again, it doesn't diminish the validity of the experience of the fear. It can still be incredibly anxiety provoking. So we've got this like disgust reaction, we've got this fear reaction, and we've got a population that hasn't really sought treatment because it maybe doesn't impede their life enough to go, I need therapy for this.
And I think there's there's the danger factor,
Absolutely.
which we see with like you said, with like snakes and, predatory animals and things, certain things that have, even like spiders that have certain types of patterns on their back or whatever. You kind of have a sense when you see something that, oh, that's poisonous, or, oh, that's dangerous.
That probably shouldn't be eaten.
Then there's the other side of this, which is it's kind of the same thing, the protection thing, but it's when they see concentric patterns or bumps or clusters, it reminds them of disease. And diseased skin, like when you have like chicken pox, or you have measles, or leprosy, or any of these like skin diseases, skin disorders, there's a reason why. And it's sad, people who have eczema and things like that have probably experienced, if they have it very, very severely, maybe on their face or in some place that's visible, people pulling back from them. And honestly, as mean as that is, and as there is a reason for that. There's a reason, because we have a natural instinct that's built into us to go, oh,
to be kind of aversive.
That's diseased. There's something, I might catch that. I might get that thing.
It's an automatic response that we can't always control, which is very unfortunate, because, some of those things are not dangerous. They're not contagious, but we've just got this lizard brain instinct reaction to these things. Is there something living inside of those holes? Is it an infection? It kind of, it stimulates unconsciously and reflexively that old lizard brain. However, it also occurs with disease irrelevant clusters, which is what makes this even more difficult to study and to figure out why we react the way we do to it, because it does not have to be disease relevant for us to have an aversion to it.
Sure. It doesn't have to. It can be, like you said, it's multiple, but there is something to it about putting it on human skin. So there's that's the reason why when you see it online, you see it so many times. They put it in with American Horror Story, which we're going to talk about later too, in the cult season. Their marketing, everything was put on like skin, on their face, on their, they put those patterns, those honeycombs, those whatever.
There was, and to bring it back around with the skin condition.
We haven't made any sexual hole jokes yet, and I'm kind of upset about that. I just have to say, hashtag your boring holes, by the way.
Hashtag your boring holes.
Yeah, make sure when you're talking about this episode, you hashtag those boring holes.
Hashtag those boring holes.
Going back to like our first episode, or one of our first episodes.
Unofficially, though, there was a study that kind of concluded that about 15% of the population may suffer from some form of this trypophobic aversion. And if you do have a skin condition, you were more likely to suffer yourself from trypophobia.
Interesting.
So think about not just the reaction of other
the fear
people,
of having it on yourself,
but the fear of but the fear of being aversive to others because of these
you're
things.
Wanting to cover up, wanting to make sure that they don't see that thing.
And because you feel, instinctively yourself like something is wrong, even though we know it's not valid medically. So it's very complex, and there just hasn't been an opportunity or a lot of research done surrounding trypophobia itself.
Did you look into at all the concept that it might be possibly OCD related or kind of OCD linked? That was something that I looked into a little bit.
So what I found with that is there was some studies, not necessarily linked to OCD, but more linked to the stark contrast of shapes with colors. So shapes that were repetitive with a stark light to dark.
So like a zebra print, like you're saying, like it's light, and then you have this very dark pattern.
That were closely grouped together, that just really caused, this intense reaction in folks, regardless of whether or not you had OCD or anything. But I wonder if it's something to do with visual patterns in OCD, because it can be so visual and visually triggered, I should say. I wonder if there's something with OCD that may also include that kind of visual sensitivity.
So it's interesting. I talked to Lacey the other night. We were at your roller derby little practice bout the other day, and our friend Lacey was there.
Go Greasers.
And we were talking about this a little bit, and she was saying that she has this beautiful piece, this tattoo piece on her arm that's a flower, and some other shapes and stuff like that. And it was done by Tony Jackson, who
he's
did,
magnificent.
He did a tattoo on me as well a while back. Wonderful artist in Carson City. And she has I think all of her tattoos pretty much are done by him. And she told him, just do whatever you want to do. Here's the idea, run with it. And he had made the flower with very small concentric circles. She got home and started looking at it in the mirror and would get nauseous every time she looked at it.
Oh no.
And was just like disgusted by it. And literally had to go back to him and say, you have to fix it. Fill it in. You have to change this.
Fill it in.
You have to change
Get rid of it.
She had to change he went in and changed the patterns and he was like, she's like, he had no fucking clue what I was talking about. He was like, what is wrong with you? Like, what do you mean? Like, I have no idea what you're talking about.
See,
so she explained it to him and what the whole phobia was all about.
There's something visually
and he went in and
there.
changed it. And he went in and changed the tattoo and made it different. It's still beautiful.
There's something visually there. And that's why I'm so curious as to if folks with visual impairment issues may experience trypophobia still, or some form of it based on one of their other senses. But it is very visually based, and it tends to be concentric shapes that are in stark contrast between the darkness in the background or
something. But I don't think it's not always the case for sure.
No, but
there's definitely something
there visually.
I found this comment on one of the articles I was reading, which I thought was super interesting. I'd gotten to the end of the articles and I was starting to read some of the comments down below. And this guy posted, I'm a physician and I had a visceral reaction to this liver cyst during my surgery rotation in my 3rd year. That fucking thing had this loculated, which is what a great word that I have never heard before.
Ooh.
Loculated, which basically means clustered.
Yeah.
It's like they used a lot with tumors and stuff.
As they kind of multiply,
in
but
X-rays
they stay
where they
there.
see areas of cluster in like one area, they loculated. Good word. That fucking thing had this loculated honeycomb appearance. And I'm shiver cringing as I write this.
Shiver cringing.
Almost passed out on top of this person. And I'm no wimp. Give me puke or blood or cadavers any day. I thought that was
shiver.
So he's here he's doing surgery and he's got this person opened up and on the table and he sees this
honeycomb,
this
basically.
Liver cyst, honeycomb looking liver cyst, and almost passes out.
I feel
the guy's in hands deep in blood and guts
all the time,
and he almost passes out when he sees that. Isn't that crazy?
That's nuts.
I thought that was really interesting.
And that's that override of the autonomic nervous system. Yeah. It doesn't matter logically what you've done before, or that this is what it's going to look like. Sometimes it just incites this reaction that we cannot physically stop.
So interesting.
Very, very interesting.
Well. Is there anything else that you want to add on this section before we can always kind of jump back when we go through our movies and stuff, but is there anything else that you wanted to kind of throw in there?
No, let's go for it. Cause I'm ready to shiver cringe some more.
There's a lot. So there's a lot of trypophobic scenes in horror movies, and there's a lot of characters that use that
disgust reaction.
Yeah. And I think it's funny. I think that before this even became a term or a thing, it was already
grossed out by it.
It was already established and people already kind of knew that was a gross,
or it made them uncomfortable.
Thing. Yeah, and we didn't even know why. It just wasn't the things, because you have like Freddy's face and skin is very messed up and diseased looking and trypophobic, right? And there's a scene in Nightmare 3, Dream Warriors, where he has the syringe hands and and Punk Rock Taryn is like a druggie and he injects her, and then there's these little bumps that kind of come alive on her arm.
Ooh.
And like and they give it like an up close look to it. I've heard that's a very triggering scene for a lot of people. But even like Jason's mask, all the clustered holes in Jason's mask, Pinhead from Hellraiser, the little, just his kind of symmetrical holes all through his face.
If you feel bothered and uneasy during one of these movies and you're not sure why, stop and ask yourself what you're seeing visually that might be triggering something automatically under the surface, making you uneasy.
And there's tons of body horror, like body horror movies are one of my favorite categories. Like I love body horror, just like gross, transitioning, nasty, good special, like those good practical special effects. And lots of body horror has this, in Slither 2005, when there's a lot of just grotesque and bumps. Cabin Fever, when she's like slicing her leg off and all that. But I wanted to talk about, and I could have talked about a lot of different movies, but I decided on The Fly and The Stuff. Because those were ones that seemed to come up a lot when I asked people about more of the body horror side of things, right? Like the bumps and the just kind of diseased skin and that kind of concentric,
Can't get enough of the stuff.
It's good stuff. They just took it off of Shudder literally yesterday. I'd watched it 2 days ago, and apparently yesterday somebody was like, I was halfway through it, and then it was just gone. And when the Joe Bob had a commentary on it too, which was really fun. So
balls.
Gotta watch that stuff, man. Gotta file it away. And hopefully they'll do like a Shudder Presents like Blu-ray collection of
I would
Joe
hope
Bob.
so.
That'd be really smart.
Someone would be stupid not to.
But yeah, bumps, lesions, holes. These are all trypo-triggering effects.
Trypo-triggering.
That's what I coined that phrase.
Trypo-triggering?
Trypo-triggering effects.
I like it.
And so let's go ahead and roll our first trailer for 1985's The Stuff.
Roll that beautiful bean footage.
Oh my goodness.
Warning. We interrupt this presentation with the following urgent message regarding The Stuff. If you see it in stores, call the police. If you have it in your home, don't touch it. Get out. The Stuff is a product of nature, a deadly living organism. It is addictive and destructive. It can overcome your mind and take over your body. And nothing can stop it.
Are you prepared to say on the air that you've actually seen people devoured by the stuff?
Tonight, America is in grave danger.
It's gonna kill you! It's gonna kill you all!
The Stuff. You have been warned.
So yeah, it was difficult, I think, finding movies that were really specifically focused, with a lot of trypophobic images throughout the whole thing, or it really felt like it was intentional, except for American Horror Story, which we're going to talk about later. Which
From
I think is
start to finish, and it acknowledged it in the first two episodes.
It really did. Like it made an intentional effort.
It was great,
which was perfect for, I think, our conversation, and people really reacted to it. But one of the scenes, so I tended to pick movies that had interest, like scenes or a couple of multiple scenes that kind of stuck out. And I also love these two movies, so I figured we'll squeeze
Can't
these
get
in.
enough of the stuff.
Hopefully we'll.
Why aren't you wearing your Fly t-shirt?
I know I'm not.
What the fuck,
I know.
man?
I don't know. But the stuff we will probably get into again when we do Fear of white oozy goo. I don't know.
Are we going to do that?
Yeah.
That's the most
Fear
sexual thing you've ever said on the show, which is a lot.
But this movie came out in 1985. If you haven't seen it, it's a really fun 80s body horror. It has this.
It's great.
Has this anti-corporate, anti-consumerism message and some kick-ass commercial music videos, just right in the middle of the 80s too. So it was just perfect. It was directed by King Cohen himself, Larry Cohen, rest in peace, died earlier this year.
King Co.
Gave us, It's Alive and God Told Me To, and Cue the Winged Serpent.
Cue the Winged
Serpent. Which you need to check out on Shudder, which is still on there. I think,
with the Joe Bob commentary.
I think Q is still on there. I know they took off the stuff, but I think Q's still on there. Which is great with the Joe Bob commentary. It's so good. And also watch the King Cohen documentary on Larry Cohen, which I think is also on Shudder. If not, it's on a bunch of other apps.
And if you don't have Shudder, just fucking break down and buy it,
yeah,
please.
it's really not that
$5.
expensive. We really should be sponsored by them. I don't know why we haven't been yet.
Shudder.
Mm-hmm.
Come on, guys.
But here's the quick synopsis of it. A private detective investigates a new consumer taste treat that's absolutely delicious and just possibly lethal. This delicious treat, called the stuff, is actually a living, parasitic, and possibly sentient organism that gradually takes over the brain and then mutates those who eat it into bizarre zombie-like creatures before consuming them from the inside and leaving them literal empty shells of their former selves.
Could not be a more sexual,
Oh my gosh.
horror
Yeah,
theme.
when we were watching it with Joe Bob, I kept making memes to send it to
Darcy.
To Darcy, the mail girl. That just I couldn't not
Nuts.
it could not just be about jizz the whole time because it was this white creamy stuff.
So it was like the episode of How I Met Your Mother when they all were going through like the marathon and having spunk.
Spunk, yeah.
Spunk.
Barney,
Oh wait, no, it wasn't. It wasn't.
No,
How I
it was
Met Your
the
Mother.
League.
It was the League. Spunk. That was definitely a hearkening.
But I kept thinking of, so there's a scene in the stuff where a dude gets plastered to the wall in the motel room with the stuff, with the white stuff
Scary
sticking into the
Movie.
wall. It reminds me of the scene in Scary Movie.
Yep, Scary Movie.
With what's her name? What is her name?
Is the stuff
Anna Faris
is the stuff
was riding the dude?
Yeah,
and then he comes and
yeah,
just plasters her to the ceiling
because he's a virgin.
Oh, it's so good. Reminded me of that.
But yeah,
this movie
stuff is good stuff.
It stars Larry Cohen. Stars Larry Cohen's go-to actor, Michael Moriarty, and also stars a Goodfellas mobster, Paul Sorvino. Paulie Cicero from Goodfellas.
Paulie. Didn't he get sent to the bottom of the ocean?
No, he was. I don't remember. Did he? I don't think he ended up dying in that one. Did they end up knocking him off? I can't remember. But he went to jail for a little while.
It's been a while since I've seen that.
But this movie. So when the real trypophobic parts of this movie are when the parasite, after they eat the stuff and the stuff has done whatever it's going to do to them, it eventually
bubbles up to the surface of their skin.
Kills them by mutating their bodies and making them all like kind of break down. And during these scenes, whoever did the practical effects, which I probably should have given them credit, they use a lot of like holes in the backs of their mouths. Like their mouth would open up all funky and weird. The one that's the most talked about and the worst scene, I think, for trypophobics is Chocolate Chip Charlie Hobbs, which is played by Garrett Morris, who was on SNL for 5 or 6 years.
During the good years?
Yeah. 75 to 1980, like the best years. I mean, the really good years. He went through the transformation, like he towards the very end of the movie, it's like the last 10 minutes of the movie. He goes through this transformation and his jaw unhinges. And as his jaw unhinges, you see these diseased looking holes in the back of his mouth.
I just don't like the jaw unhinging.
As his jaw gets wider and wider, you just see it more and it really focuses in on it. And I've heard people
so rude.
When we talked about this, we were asking people about scenes in movies. That one came up a lot. So that was the reason why we wanted to mention the stuff. Not going to go into it too long. Going to leave it here.
If you haven't seen it, go get it. You won't be able to get enough of the stuff.
Can't get enough of the stuff.
stuff.
We got to play that at like one of the whole commercials at like the end or something. Because it's hilarious and it's really a fun movie. And when we watched it with Joe Bob, when Joe Bob was doing his marathon, it was so much fun. So check it out. The Stuff, 1985. But now we're just going to go 1 year later to probably one of my top 10 favorite movies of all time. So that's why I had to squeeze it in. Body horror masterpiece, Cronenberg. All about festering
festering
pustules.
Say it with me. Fresh festering pustules.
Fresh festering pustules. Ooh, I like that.
Fresh festering pustules.
So let's roll the trailer for the 1986 body horror masterpiece, The Fly.
Roll that beautiful bean footage.
Oh, do not do that again.
I think you're making a mistake. I think you really want to talk to me.
Sorry, I have 3 other interviews to do before this party's over.
Yeah, but they're not working on something that'll change the world as we know it.
They say they are.
Yeah, but they're lying.
There is a limit, even to the imagination.
Human teleportation, molecular decimation, breakdown, and reformation is inherently purging.
Where our greatest creations meet our deepest fears.
Something went wrong, Seth. When you went through, something went wrong.
You are about to go beyond that limit.
Those weird hairs that were growing out of your back, I had them analyzed. But they were definitely not human.
If you saw how scared and angry and desperate he is.
I'm sure Typhoid Mary was a very nice person, too, when you saw her socially.
No!
You're afraid to be destroyed and recreated, aren't you?
You're changing, Seth. Everything about you is changing.
Oh no, what's happening to me? Am I dying?
I want to know what's going on.
What does the disease want?
It wants to turn me into something else.
Oh no, a fly got into the transmitter pod with me that first time when I was alone.
Don't go back to it. It could be contagious.
I'm afraid!
Don't be afraid!
No, be afraid. Be very afraid.
Help me. Please, help me.
So this is our main honorable mention for Trypophobia, 1986's The Fly, which I do have an awesome t-shirt of that I'm not wearing.
Piss poor planning, Shattuck.
Well, considering it's 10 o'clock on a Sunday and there's nobody else here but you, I suppose.
Piss poor planning, Shattuck.
Many of you probably know The Fly, and The Fly was originally a 1958 movie that was remade. And I don't think I've ever seen the original.
Oh,
I need to go back and watch the original.
Why would you, when Jeff Goldblum is just so fucking pure in this?
So good. David Cronenberg movie. I am a huge David Cronenberg fan. He is the father of modern body horror. Like that's his.
He's the father of modern gross.
A lot of good gross. One of my favorite directors, top 10 film for me for sure. But I also love like The Brood and Scanners, Rabid, which by the way has a remake. The remake just came out by the Soska sisters of Rabid.
Ooh.
Came out last month.
What else did the Soska sisters do?
American Mary.
Okay.
Yeah, they've done a handful of movies.
I think that's the one I know from.
Soska sisters released at Fright Fest a few weeks ago. Look for that. I've heard it's really good. They actually got kicked off of Twitter because they put an image up that was
nice,
so grotesque. Apparently, that Twitter banned them for a while.
Cool.
How do you do that when there's porn all over Twitter? I mean, I'm not really sure how that works, but
there's porn on Twitter.
Oh yeah, tons of porn.
Oh,
yeah, you can just look up anything and it's on there.
Twat.
You don't twatter. Yeah, Cronenberg's a master, and one of the things about this phobia that I think really triggers people is that like diseased, bubbling bumps. Just the
is it gonna get on me?
That kind of nasty, thing that we see in these body horror flicks. Right?
Do you remember
these
when
concentric little bumps and these concentric little things that pop up on people's faces and arms?
Do you remember
when people are transforming?
Do you remember that one Christmas when I got hand, foot, and mouth disease?
Yes.
And the palms of my hands were covered in tiny little dots.
Yes.
Red dots.
Yeah, hand, foot, and mouth disease.
And they were itchy. They were so itchy. I would cover my hands in Benadryl cream and then sleep in mittens. Otherwise, I would scratch the skin off of the palms of my hands.
It's so similar to how shingles.
It was horrible.
My ex-wife got shingles. Maybe it's just living with me that causes these stressful things to pop up. But no, she got it when she was.
No, I got that from the boys. Remember, the boys
brought home from school.
Barely had it. Thank God.
Yeah, they had it very lightly, and then you got
God.
The worst.
That's fine, but
that
I
the
felt
visual
disgusting.
is terrible. But also the feeling that you can't scratch an itch.
An
under your
itch
skin.
you can't scratch.
Oh,
it was the worst. But like just seeing those concentric holes on my skin. I remember being like disgusted and like, this is fucking disgusting.
Well, so Cronenberg is the master of putting those disgusting things into our brains. And so much so that he's become an adjective. Really.
Yeah.
I mean, Cronenberg is Cronenbergian, and Cronenberg is like,
he's made it to Family Guy. So.
Rick and Morty.
And Rick and Morty.
It was Rick and Morty, not Family Guy.
Oh, I'm sure he's made it to Family Guy too.
The Rick and Morty episode where they all turn into Cronenberg was the best. Yeah, that was so good. And I think that's what we should all attain in our lives, is try to become an adjective, right? I mean, don't we want to all be an adjective?
That's a great thing to aspire to be. Be an adjective.
Be an adjective. Yeah,
well, something that, although you don't want to
be, it could be a negative. Though,
I was like, you don't want to be like, don't be such a fucking Drew.
I mean, don't be a Bundy. That's probably
don't be a Bundy.
That's probably not a good thing, right?
No.
Well, let's get the synopsis here.
Quit being so OJ.
When scientist Seth Brundle, played by Jeff Goldblum, completes his teleportation device, he decides to test its abilities on himself.
Ruh-roh.
Unbeknownst to him, a housefly slips in during the process, leading to a merger of man and insect.
Ugh.
Initially, Brundle appears to have undergone a successful teleportation, but the fly's cells begin to take over his body. As he becomes increasingly fly-like, Brundle's girlfriend, played by Gina Davis, is horrified as the person she once loved deteriorates into a monster.
No, but like literally deteriorates. It's pretty gross.
Yeah.
It's like leproseric.
Yeah, I mean, it's really graphic. And I remember this. One of the reasons it's one of my favorites is because it was a kinder trauma for me, because I was told to go to bed.
Trauma.
This was one that I distinctly remember. They rented it. We rented this, and we rented some other kiddie younger movie that I was able to watch. Right. So we watched the first movie, and then it was my bedtime, and I didn't want to go to bed, but I went to bed, and my bedroom was upstairs and everybody was downstairs in the living room. And if I came down, there was a dark hallway. If I went and sat in that dark hallway, nobody would see me. So there was a lot of times I would come in and I would sit in that dark hallway when they thought I was in bed and watch whatever they were watching. And I remember watching this, and it was probably 87 or 86. It may have been right after it came out. Watching this while they were and seeing the first scenes. I think I may have ran upstairs and gone to bed after.
You're like, oh no, fuck
after
this.
I saw the first couple of scenes of him coming out.
I'm out.
Like actually transforming. But those images are really stuck in my head.
I'm out.
So it was, but I think as a trypophobic, one of the things that I think, this movie, we'll probably circle back to this movie again. Hopefully we'll do a Fear of Flies episode and we can really dive into this one. But the gnarly trypophobic scenes are as he's transforming from a human into a fly. So we see initially, and this is a question I have for you, and I'm really curious about this. And if you're a trypophobic out there, I'm curious if this is a thing. The beginning of his transformation, he just starts to have like acne, right? His face just gets kind of acne and pock marks. Like, do trypophobics have a fear of people with like severe acne? I'm curious.
It's possible.
Like,
I mean,
like Edward James Olmos. Like if you have Edward James Olmos face, like that pockmark face, is that something that freaks about Edward James Olmos face?
Oh my God, you're so rude.
Have you seen Edward James Olmos face?
I have, but
there's a distinctive Edward James Olmos face.
There's a way to frame it.
If you have it, I'm sorry. It's a bummer.
But no, I imagine
you're beautiful in your own way.
I imagine
he's a famous actor, so
I mean, obviously it's not aversive enough to keep famous people from acting, but I mean, I guess if you have trypophobia severe enough, any kind of concentric, closely grouped shapes, whether it be on skin or not, probably would be somewhat bothersome.
Yeah, I mean, so I was really curious about that. Like, if you have somebody who just had this, like if you run across a 16-year-old kid who's just got acne all over his face, is that a trigger? I suppose it could be.
I don't know. Sure. Some people are definitely turned on by it because there's a lot of folks that watch Dr. Pimple Popper and buy like little pimple popping machines.
You people are the problem with society.
There's folks,
pimple popper people.
Well, not just that, but like we had somebody reach out on social media and let us know that they felt like these concentric circles or shapes were actually soothing.
That's right.
And
not
alarming or disturbing at all, but more so those images they found really, really soothing.
Yeah.
And she called herself a philiac, which was so fun.
Yeah. She's like, I want to like rub my hands on them. And like, it's
so that's
soothing.
And that's why I'm curious whether or not this trypophobia would translate across senses. Is can you have trypophobia induced by touch, or does it become soothing when those things are, when it's not visual, right?
Sure.
When it's more touch, does it become more soothing? So it's just such an interesting reaction that we can kind of manipulate across the spectrum depending upon what senses we use.
Yeah. So I was watching The Fly yesterday, and as I was watching it, I was trying to like pay attention to like his transformation as it kind of progressed. So after he goes through the teleportation thing, at first he's all Superman, and then he slowly goes through the transformation. And that was one of the first things, was he got real acne looking, and then started getting more kind of pop marky. And then he started getting the boils, right? More like boiled skin that was bumpy and textured, and on his face started getting very grotesque. And that body transformation is what I hear makes people very uncomfortable.
Well, think about what happens to a lot of folks who struggle with methamphetamine addiction, because the methamphetamine crystallizes in their body. It comes from the inside out, trying to push its way. And that's why there are those marks on their skins, because they're either literally picking at the crystallized version of methamphetamine underneath their skin, excuse me, or it's, it's creating these lesions because it's burning from the inside out. And that definitely, I've seen folks that have had such severe methamphetamine reaction that it's disturbing.
They look like the grotesque body transformation.
Right. And they're not diseased. It's just
they are diseased.
Something is trying to come out of their body that isn't supposed to be there, and our brain has a natural reaction to that, to go, "Oh, I don't want that to happen," or I don't want that to somehow be, me.
Yeah, I'm actually about 10,000 words into a book that I'm
so excited
starting
for
to
that
write,
book.
That deals with meth as kind of a central theme in the.
I love your first chapter.
So
it was great.
That'd be an interesting, because I think it's really interesting, and you could play on a lot of that, like that how meth really does kind of take over your body, and like.
Well, it represents too, kind of the disease that is within, the thing that drives us to addiction and self-destruction, things like that.
So as our Brundlefly starts taking shape, he's mutating, his skin is changing, he gets this grotesque body transformation. There's all these really gnarly, gross scenes. But towards the end, right, as when he is in his like worst, well, almost worst state, when he's still partly human, but he's about ready to like go full fucking fly. He jumps through the window into the doctor's office at the end, and she's going in to get an abortion because she's
gonna have
a fly baby. Yeah.
Or babies.
And he's just covered head to toe, mutated with these bumps and boils and just looks, I mean, his face is all sideways and grotesque and gnarly. And so, the whole thing is one part of this, but I think people really are just the diseased skin part, the bumps, the close concentric bumps, like all those things. And I was looking at it, I was going, yeah, if this was a thing of mine, like this would be really, really hard to watch. And I could have chosen a lot of different movies that have like pulsating skin and body horror tropes.
Bubbling
it's not uncommon, but this is just like an example of what we were.
A couple of really good ones. Well, these are some good examples of
it's not just porous surfaces and clustered holes. It's diseased.
This is the diseased
bumps and skin
portion of it.
Yeah, right.
Whereas trypophobia really kind of encompasses even the non-diseased images,
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that's where I think our main feature presentation really nailed it on the head.
You loved this too, and you watched it 3 times?
Probably 3 times
from start to finish?
Whole way through to kind of get everything that was there.
So I think this is the first time that you've been like more into watching the feature than I have. As far as like really diving into it. And I really enjoyed it too. And I've enjoyed the whole series. But they really doubled down on.
They did
They really
great.
doubled down on phobias in general,
On
which is
fear.
great. Fear was the emphasis.
Is the theme.
But let's go ahead and roll the trailer. Do not say beautiful bean footage. I will kick you right in the box. Right in the box.
No beautiful bean footage?
No. It's ugly. Gross phobia footage.
Gross bean footage. Well, beans
Beans are
could
gross.
be trypophobic, you know? They dump out a can of beans.
Yes.
And like it's all concentric bean shaped.
It's a good point. Not bad. Well, let's take a look at the trailer for was it 2017 that came out?
Yeah.
2017's
Last year was Apocalypse.
American Horror Story Season 7 Cult.
And now our feature presentation.
What's the thing that scares you the most?
It is now official. Donald Trump is the next president of the United States.
Since election night, it has just all been getting so much worse.
The recurrence of the trypophobia?
Yes, the clowns.
I'll work through it.
He was right there.
Ellie, this is ridiculous.
I know what I saw.
What fills your heart with dread?
Children. I've always enjoyed children. Here, I got this for you. Just don't tell your moms.
I'm not making this up.
I don't know how much more of this I can take.
If you get people scared enough, they will set the world on fire. It's the most intense physical pain you've ever experienced.
When I open this door, do not let go of my hand.
American Horror Story Cult premieres Tuesday, September 5th on FX.
So American Horror Story Season 7, the Cult season. Definitely, this whole show has been kind of a polarizing show, I think.
For sure.
Some people love it or hate it. Some people love certain seasons and can't stand other seasons.
Agree.
And I definitely have my favorites.
Couldn't stand Roanoke.
We were just talking about it. Like you didn't like Roanoke. I liked Roanoke. Okay. I really liked Freak Show as my
Freak
favorite.
Show was pretty good.
You liked the first season.
I like Murder House.
Murder House is like your favorite season.
It was
which
great.
I was like, yeah, it's all right.
Has Zachary Quinto.
I liked
in
the
it.
Asylum season.
Asylum was good.
Did
you like Coven?
I liked Coven okay. Like I didn't.
It was okay.
I didn't hate it. I liked the fact that it was set in New Orleans and it had
That was
the
really
whole
fun.
voodoo side of it. So
we got to see the Murder House. Remember, we went by the house that's based on that Murder House, La Laurie Mansion.
Yeah. The La
Laurie Mansion.
Yeah.
We saw that when we were in New Orleans. It's turned into like apartments, and
Yeah.
they try and pretend like it didn't happen there, but it did.
Yeah, and it was Angela Bassett played Marie Laveau,
Mhm.
and that was a great season. But this Cult season, we'd started watching last year, I think, sometime, and we got maybe halfway through it and we didn't finish it.
Yeah.
So I remembered a lot of it as we rewatched it this past week.
And we kind of had a distaste of it because
I didn't
of the political themes.
The political theme. So when I first dove into it, I just didn't even want to touch it because it was so fresh off the elections and politics was just ugly and everything's just been ugly with politics lately. And so I just didn't want to, on all sides, I didn't want to even touch it, you know, and I think that was initially a bit of a turnoff. But as you'll see, I think throughout this season really tackles politics in a really interesting way and actually lampoons politics on all sides.
Everyone.
And makes and that's kind of the point of the season in a lot of ways is to show what the foundations of kind of our political system are.
Or how those decisions have come
about. Sure. But this season was created by the creators of the show, Ryan Murphy and Brad Fulchik, who have done just a really, really, I mean, if nothing else, American Horror Story has brought
horror to the masses.
It's brought horror to the masses and done it in a pretty graphic, like it doesn't pull back. I mean, It doesn't hold back. I mean, there's dudes getting banged with,
screw dicks
in hotel season.
Right.
There's been some weird shit in this, they've done a good job, with that kind of stuff. So,
and this is on Main Street, this is on FX. This is on, regular television.
Yeah. And each episode is directed by multiple people. So this particular season, there was some episodes directed by Angela Bassett. Jennifer Lynch directed one of them, which is David Lynch's daughter.
Oh, yeah.
So I thought that was kind of interesting. The cast a lot of the cast is repeated from previous.
Yeah, it's a recurring cast, but playing different characters.
Sure.
Which is fucking brilliant. Like, they are amazing actors and actresses.
Yeah, they really are. And like Sarah Paulson plays Allie Mayfair Richards, which is kind of our central character. She's one of our main central characters.
She's the trypophobic. She's
the one who has all the phobias in the beginning. Allison Pill plays Ivy Mayfair Richards, who's her wife. She's in her 30s, but I always think of her like younger roles. Like, have you ever Googled her? She had the short hair in this one, and she looked kind of different, but she has longer hair in other roles. She was in Scott Pilgrim versus the World. And she was also in Cooties, to that movie with was Elijah Wood. Really fun little funny horror flick. And then we have Evan Peters, who plays Kai Anderson.
The fucking
and honestly, that guy just is
stole
phenomenal.
The whole season.
Like, if you think of the amount of roles he's played since the first season through now, I mean, it's really incredible.
And I can't believe that neither he nor Sarah Paulson are going to be in 1984.
Yeah, apparently they're not doing the new
crazy.
one. Which, maybe they're planning their exit strategy. Maybe it's time to move on. But
still, fantastic.
Yeah, so good. And in this season, he plays Kai Anderson, but he also plays Jim Jones. He plays Andy Warhol.
Manson.
He plays Charles Manson. I mean, the guy, and really convincingly, and just
I didn't even recognize that he was Andy Warhol until I went back this third time watching, and I went, "What the?"
Wasn't there a David Koresh scene too?
Yeah, David Koresh
as well.
He was all of these, kind of cultish leaders.
Yeah. Really, holy shit! Like,
so
amazing.
Good,
pretty badass.
What a performance!
Billy Lord is in this one. She plays Winter Anderson. And she's also in Star Wars: The Last Jedi and Force Awakens as Lieutenant Connix. Also in Scream Queens. Also the daughter of Carrie Fisher.
That's right.
Yeah, she's Carrie Fisher and Eddie Fisher's daughter.
That's right.
So comes from a pretty solid lineage.
Nah.
And then we have Billy Eichner as the neighbors, Harrison Wilton.
Hell yeah, Billy.
And Leslie Grossman, who's also you'd recognize her in a second too. Plays Meadow Wilton, his kind of wife. Like,
it's his gay wife.
His gay
wife for life.
Wife, yeah.
They said by the time they were 30, if neither of them were married, that they would get married, and
so that's our cast. And they really did an incredible job. And that's one thing that I've really appreciated about these shows is that they really do have phenomenal acting performances.
Yeah.
So what is this season about? I tried to find a synopsis of the season. I really couldn't find like a good succinct synopsis to read. So I kind of made my own.
There's so many tangents.
It just goes off into a lot of different areas. But ultimately, American Horror Story season 7 is about fear. Like, it is about fear. And that's why I think for our show, like, this was so spot on. As we're watching it, we're going, oh man, this is like perfect. And in the first few episodes, we see them. So probably like a lot of you, we've been really big fans of some seasons, have been starstruck. Some seasons struck us as better than others. And this season didn't grab me right away, like we said, especially because of the political theme.
It grabbed me right away.
And I just don't want to watch the shit out of something that I try to avoid on a daily basis.
Well, which is funny because I am so like, last time that voting was around was the first time I ever voted in my life. So I am very not political because
whereas I am much more political.
Very political. Yeah. And I'm a lot.
I'm just kidding.
I'm a lot like Meadow in this, where she's like, some people should just not vote because, like me, unless you do your research and you're informed, it's not helpful to just kind of vote off of a whim. And that's kind of been my belief my whole life, which is why I never
voted. It's the belief that you're not smart enough to vote. Like, you haven't done enough.
Exactly. I don't have like that basis.
Who's running for offices, and you realize that,
So the fact that this season grabbed me and not you, I found was really interesting because I thought I would be turned off.
But what you find out as you go through this whole season is that ultimately it's not really about politics. It's about the cult of personalities on all sides, and how fear motivates us and controls our lives.
It's really about the glitter.
It's about how fear controls every part of our lives. And it spends a fair amount of time, I think, lampooning both Democrats and Republicans on both sides, and really shows like what's motivating these various parties. But we start out with our main character, Allie Mayfair Richards, Sarah Paulson. And she is they're really demonstrating in the first few episodes the practical picture of fear.
Mm-hmm.
This is how I put it.
The everyday picture of fear.
Practical picture of fear displayed through everyday phobias,
Mm-hmm.
right? Some phobias that we may consider, extreme, but she has
others that are common.
She has a whole fucking mess of them.
Yeah, she's got a bucket.
So she suffers from some that we've covered already. Coulrophobia, the fear of clowns. She suffers from hemophobia, the fear of blood, which we haven't done yet. We should do that one. Phoretrophobia, which is the fear of coffins. Actually, she may not be. That was the other couple.
Was the other couple.
There was another couple that suffered from the fear of coffins. But she was agoraphobic as well, which they brought up.
And we find out all of this while she is undergoing therapy.
Right. She's going through a therapist, and the therapist is bringing out.
And she is calling out these phobias. She's saying,
the election brought, right. We have Trump winning the election. We show the beginning, right. We got the election going on. Trump wins the election.
Kai Anderson blends up a bunch of Cheetos and then puts them all over his face, which is
to rub it into his
simultaneously hilarious and the most disturbing thing I've ever seen.
Pretty disturbing. But then we have we have Sarah Paulson and we have
the main couple,
Ivy and Allie, who are a lesbian couple.
And they have a son.
And they are losing their mind, right, after the election. Donald Trump won. We're not going to be, they're going to outlaw gay marriage. They're going to do this. They're going to do that.
They're going to deport our nanny.
They're going to deport our nanny. They're going to deport our, they're going to do all these things, and they're losing their minds, right? They're just like.
Everything is over.
Everything's over. And just collapsing. And so that triggers Allie's fears. So now her
to go into hyperdrive
triggers her phobias, kicks them into high gear, and we see her in the therapist office talking about like the clowns.
Yeah, she starts seeing clowns in the grocery store, and they all suspiciously have things on their masks that incite her phobias.
So then we get into specifically. So we can talk about all the various fears she goes through. Yeah. She has a bunch of them, and it's really a fun kind of a fun I won't say dive. A fun deep dive, a fun discussion about a lot of different phobias.
Yeah.
But then we find out she's sitting in the therapist office, and she sees a piece of coral up on the shelf. She's been going there for a while, and she brings up the fact that thing is driving her.
It's looking at her.
It's driving her crazy. It's looking at her. It's whatever. And he's like, well, you've been here for
why
lots of sessions. Why hasn't this bothered
you
you before? Well, all these phobias are starting to pop up again, and we see the coral up close, and it's just a trypophobic's nightmare.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. So it's got all of these porous holes and just very incongruent and at various colors, and it's
light and dark contrast.
Light and dark, right? Red and white.
Ugh.
So then we start seeing these trypophobic things. Everywhere, right? We see him on that she's being attacked by clowns, and there's this clown gang, and there's holes all in the mask, right? We start seeing it in her crumpets. She's eating crumpets, and then of course blood starts oozing blood, which is even worse because it's like that's part of the disease thing, but her blood phobia as well. Crumpets. That's another thing we didn't talk about. Food. There's a lot of trypophobic
There's so many trypophobic foods.
Like crumpets are a big deal. Those ones that sell at Trader Joe's. I saw that one pop up at Reddit a lot.
Oh, really?
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
The crumpets at Trader Joe's that are just
all the nooks and crannies are bothersome.
Yeah. And also yeast or like bread dough before it's like when it's real yeasty and it has a lot of like the sourdough and stuff.
I wonder
that.
pancakes when they're rising.
Oh, yeah, people when they start bubbling on top.
Yeah.
Coffee bubbles.
Like the little coffee bubbles.
Coffee bubbles that
or soda bubbles, I guess.
Yeah, any sort of like concentric bubbles. And so for the sake of this episode, let's talk a little bit about, before we even talk more about the episodes themselves. Let's start with the marketing for this season.
Brilliant.
So people went so far. I even saw like comments. There was an American Horror Story cult Reddit forum that I was reading through, and there were people who literally said, "You people are
disgusting
and irresponsible. Like, how dare you trigger people like this? Like, that's how visceral people were."
Yeah, they did not like.
And so in the marketing, we see they used a lot of honeycomb imagery.
Oh yeah.
And one of my favorites was the nose of the clown. They actually had the nose of a clown in one of the ads was all a honeycomb. It was red, but it was all a honeycomb.
What's really interesting is the dual function that serves, because it serves to highlight the hive mentality, as well as cause that kind of underlying disturbance. You didn't notice that?
I didn't think about that. The hive mentality.
Shit, I got some stuff
the bees
for you.
and that kind of stuff.
Ooh, get ready. I'm gonna take you on a wild ride, honey.
The woman lifting up her tongue. In that one.
Oh, and there's all holes underneath.
It's like a strawberry though.
Yeah.
I don't know if you noticed it was like a strawberry because it had like kind of like little prickles
seeds,
coming off of it.
Yeah.
And she's also painted up like a clown. So it does, again, dual function. This goes back to our coulrophobia the last couple weeks.
Oh yeah.
Clown face rising up through the water with thousands of tiny bubbles surrounding it.
You would not like this season if you did not like clowns. If you did not like a lot of things. There's a lot of things in the season.
A lot of things that would
be a problem.
The clown mask and the clear game, we just talked about, the clustered little holes punched in it. These are all their ads, by the way. These are all various ads that were used.
Someone in marketing is fucking evil.
Tiny symmetrical clown heads, like barnacles, that they had like
barnacles.
Circled around.
Oh, octopus tentacles.
Yeah, barnacles, tentacles. So they used that theme too, but it was just clown. It was like clown heads, but it was all looked like almost looked like barnacles. Weird black webbed like honeycomb mask that was covering a blue head. So again, that contrast, blue and black. With bees rummaging around on it. So it looked like it was kind of like
things are crawling in and out.
And these were all just such vivid images too. Honeycomb mirrored reflection with a clown face in it. It was like a clown face, but it was all mirrored and honeycombed and kind of distorted. There was, and even in some of the up close images, so like you would have to really zoom in. Some of the clown's eyeballs are honeycombed inside of their eyeballs. You wouldn't even notice it if you didn't like zoom in. So there's a lot of little details in their marketing that they did.
And they did that throughout every single episode too.
Lots of scenes.
They brought in, scenes where there's clowns with the holes in the mask, but also everything in the background of the grocery store is symmetric and what is it? Concentric.
Yeah. Probably the most recognizable marketing image is the
honeycomb head.
The head cut off, right? Or top of her head's cut off and her brain's like a honeycomb.
The hive mind.
Blue woman. I'll get through these. These are all different marketing things. And I went through every single one of them because I was like, and that's where I got nauseous. When I started going through it and I was like, oh my gosh. The blue woman pulling her eyelids up to reveal honeycomb eyes.
Ooh.
The bleeding porous crumpets was one of the marketing images. The chick laying in a vat of honey with honeycombs beneath the surface, and it was almost like a coffin of honeycombs, and her skin is covered in like the standard trypophobic holes that you see the images of, like she's got those on her body. And then finally, there's the up close picture of the coral in the office of the.
I'm so glad you didn't send all of these to me.
Well, I'm gonna create like a little like slideshow of them.
You are freaking evil.
for our
just like disturbing
our
everyone
marketing this week. But overall, I think this season really tackles fear as like a motivating concept in our relationships with one another, as neighbors, as citizens, as different genders, as races, and then ultimately in our individual politics. And I think, like I said, it starts out with these phobias. She's dealing with all of these personal phobias, right?
Well, everybody in the show is dealing with these phobias. I went
in
back
different ways, yeah.
I went back and I looked up the vulnerabilities that kind of Kai uses to make people lose their minds.
Well, and what's Kai's fears? I mean, Kai has all these deep-seated fears.
Kai has a fear of being nothing.
Yeah.
And he has perpetually throughout his life done nothing with his life. And that is his biggest fear. And so that's how his fears and vulnerabilities that really are what made his cult personality grow and thrive. But it did take someone, his own therapist, nourishing that, which I think that was the only thing about this season that really bothered me was that therapists are always perceived as like these people that can manipulate people, and we can. And I think that's a warning to us, because it is very easy to manipulate someone when you're aware of their vulnerabilities.
Well,
and it is your responsibility as a therapist to not use those for evil, but for good, because looking at our vulnerabilities and discovering them and exploring them is part of what fills up those holes inside of us. And that's really what all of this is about. It's about everyone seeking, knowingly or unknowingly, to fill the holes inside of themselves and to feel whole. Period.
So you think that was what the trypophobic kind of like
everything
theme was and why it was so
everything and why.
I like that. I think you're probably spot on. And I think that's exactly what, and as you go through, we start seeing fear manifest into cultural action, right? That's how the cult starts forming, right? Kai Anderson, the Evan Peters character, starts forming this cult out of fear of women taking over, the liberals taking over, the immigrants, the kind of the racist motif. And
that's what we learn in the first couple of episodes. We learn what vulnerabilities Kai uses to use fear as a motivator for people to protect themselves. So for instance, Billy Eichner's character, his fear was of acknowledging that he was gay, and of actually being in a relationship with a man, and of being alone, which is why he married.
And inferiority. I mean, we saw that in the gym, right? Like,
but that was because
boss,
he was gay,
right? It was because he was gay, but it was also something internal with him where he felt like he had no control over the things around him. Like other people were forcing him to be something else,
right?
And
then Beverly, she was the
reporter, right?
She was the reporter. She was dealing with, being.
These are all people that ended up in his cult,
right?
Too.
Being an older African-American woman who also struggled with mental health, which they did not touch on.
They really didn't,
except for to mention "Welcome Back,
she had
Beverly."
A breakdown.
From
but
your
they showed her.
basically.
They did show her breakdown. They showed it
a little bit.
They showed the clips of when she was breaking down and what was causing it.
But that was something for her that was her fear, was of kind of dealing and rationalizing with that, and of feeling inferior or feeling powerless because of that. Chaz Bono's character, the grocery store owner who saws his own arm off to go and vote for Trump because Kai trapped him in his basement and was basically like, tell me, basically like, if you believe in this so much, prove it.
Show it.
And he sawed his own arm off. His fear came from a fear of being replaced by immigrants.
Right.
Of no longer having a place, of being displaced by some alien form, whether it be, immigrants or someone else taking his spot. For him, it happened to be kind of thrust onto immigrants in particular. We see Kai, his fear of being nothing. His father expressed to him that he was nothing and he was never going to be anything. His brother was a therapist. His sister was going to, Berkeley or wherever, a great college, and
he was just
and he was at home on 4chan, just wasting away his life before Kai killed his mom and his dad.
He was an incel, basically.
Yeah, he was an incel. Winter desperately, no matter how much she tried, she really strove to get the acceptance of the males in her life. She was afraid of not being accepted by males, and projected
that daddy issue stuff too, because dad was abusive.
Right.
And dad had been at
and
home,
she was the youngest.
And then dad had died. That was the whole thing about their parents being killed, and they just left the bodies in their
in like a mausoleum, like
in their bedroom, basically just left them there. So
they covered them in lye, which was the older brother who happens to be the therapist. And then we've got
Allie's
Kai,
therapist. He ends up being Allie's therapist.
And then we've got Winter, who's the youngest, and she was away at college when the parents died. And she really just wants male acceptance in her life, even though we see her going out and participating in the Hillary Clinton's campaign and being very pro-woman and I'm a feminist and blah, blah, but yet her biggest fear is not being accepted by the men in her life.
Yep.
Allie has a fear of confronting her fears. In general, she does not want to get the feeling of fear. So she takes out everything in her life that could possibly cause her these things. And then when the election happens, it brings all of these vulnerabilities to the surface. And she starts seeing them everywhere and refusing to confront them and using these same old behaviors to try and avoid them. And they're not working. And then finally, Ivy. Ivy is terrified of not being a true mother. Allie gave birth to their son Oz.
Right.
Ivy
so she
did
has
not.
That inferiority complex
this,
of I wasn't the one who actually
I have endometriosis.
Experienced pregnancy or wasn't the actual mother.
So therefore I'm not this true mother. And so the whole time she is so fearful of not actually being a mother and not having that thing that kind of leaves your presence on this earth after you're gone. Really, the only one that we see who
also ends up being in part of the cult. So the cults end up being the neighbors, right? Billy,
which is why I went through all those people.
Right. Those were all the people that were ultimately
that end up
in the cult, in Kai Anderson's cult at one point or another, in one facet or another.
And Kai, the only person really in this show who is exhibiting like a true curiosity for their fears in an appropriate way and kind of exploring them in an appropriate way would be Oz. Oz is reading scary stories,
which is the child.
It's a child.
It's Allie and Ivy's child.
Yeah, he is actually
who's probably 7 years old or
7
8 years
or 8.
old.
Yeah,
like that.
He actually is working on confronting and almost befriending his fears.
Right.
When winter comes and really screws that up and makes it way too intense. But he was appropriately working on it. He was reading the stories on Twisty the Killer,
Twisty the Clown,
and processing those fears. And his mom was. Allie was initially trying to hide him from those fears, to shield him from those fears, right?
Right.
But we see
because those are her fears.
Because those
not
are
because
hers
they're
too.
his
right.
things that he needs to deal with. It's because of the things that she needs
and she
to deal
doesn't
with.
want him to be afraid of them either.
Right.
So if I just take them
if
away,
I shield
then he
them,
won't
right,
be
which
afraid.
is the opposite of what you should be doing
exactly.
with your fears. Your fears are you should be confronting those fears.
We should be befriending.
And even
fears.
the way that he confronts Kai later on. Because they bring him to this cult, they have this cult house, and he confronts Kai on his bullshit.
Yeah,
and like
Kai sees through it all.
Yeah, he's
Oz sees through
it
all of Kai.
Yeah, all of Kai's bullshit, and it was interesting. So overall, I think this season it really tackles fear as a motivating concept in our relationships, with one another, as neighbors, as citizens, as different genders, like I was saying, as races, and ultimately in our individual politics.
Mm-hmm.
But it really tackles fear as human conditioning.
Yep.
Which I thought was really interesting. The politics of fear as being the reason why these political parties thrive
on fear and fear.
The reason
tactics.
why that our politics in the United States, what drives these extremists, this extreme polarization, right? These extremist sides. And why we continue to vote for these awful people to represent
why
us.
did this happen?
This is really, and I thought it was so interesting. By the time it got to the end of the season, we see these characters progress, and particularly Allie, right? We see her being triggered by the election, to then dealing with these cacophony of these different phobias that are coming back to torment her, and then we see the character of Kai developing his own cult of personality that includes, Allie and the neighbors and all that stuff like we talked about. The local cop, the news reporter, all that stuff.
Everyone.
And we see overreactions and irrational fears that surface after this election. And if you think about it, like we see this in our culture every time there's an election.
All the time. Every
time we had an election since I've been alive, we see these overreactions from every ideological side. We see extremism of all kinds taking like this bully pulpit, no matter what party takes over the Oval Office. Extremism always has fear at the center of it.
Yeah.
Always. Fear is at the center of any extremist point of view, any political party. You look at the rise of fascism in Germany and Italy. You look at the rise of communism in Russia and China. These things always inject fear into the people first.
Why is it so effective, though? It's because fear brings every emotion to the surface, and it makes us so raw.
It's the foundational principle. It's got to be the foundational principle, or you cannot control people. You cannot control people without fear. That's why extremism has to prey on fear.
Because we become desperate to be soothed of that pain. We become desperate to be soothed of that raw emotional feeling that fear brings about. We become desperate to be safe again. Yeah. And when we become desperate, we become willing to completely go against our own values and ideals.
You know what's so interesting right now in history at this moment is that we're safer now than we've ever been.
Mm-hmm.
Literally in history. If you are living in the United States of America, you are safer now than you have ever been throughout history. Like, we have lower crime rates. We have lower, believe it or not, violent shootings and acts of violence or personal violence and things like that are have all been going down,
trending downward.
We're not actively fighting, we're not fighting a world war. I mean, we're
not yet.
Of course, we're fighting wars on every continent, probably.
But
endless wars that seem to never want to end.
But the threat and the fear of impending war also drives our behavior and our actions and our decision making every single day, all the time. And that fear leverages our selfish impulses to want to survive by being able to weaponize our pain through promising to destroy it, which is a more powerful feeling than feeling helpless against what you're afraid of. So we see this theme the entire season of American Horror Story and currently in our society, that victimization is this fertile breeding ground for leveraging these things and weaponizing our pain.
Victimization. Right. If you can convince people that they're victims, or that this particular group, this identity group, this whatever it is, if you can convince them they're victims, you can instill fear in them and you can get them on your side. You can manipulate them.
It becomes easier to do that because we desire to not be afraid, right? We desire to feel safe in our world. And this season tells us that everybody, no matter what group, what belief system, what political party, what the fuck you were born into, it doesn't matter. You have something that can be manipulated, exploited.
Sure.
Thank you. You have something.
If you're what it did, and what I loved about this season was it didn't matter whether you were like the white middle class, or you were the homosexual couple, or you were the African Americans were on both sides. Like, it didn't matter what race you were or where you came from. It didn't matter. The point was, every group is being exploited by fear. Everybody's susceptible. Yeah, everybody's susceptible to this kind of manipulation that's going on. And I thought that was brilliant, and I really thought that was
by fear.
It was so good. And we see, like we said, extremism is kind of like, that's what happens in our culture, is we're getting more and more extreme, and the two sides of our political system get more polarized, right? We see that this is such a fear is such a central component
to all of
those things.
I'm afraid that someone will take away my right to do what I want with my body.
Right.
I'm afraid someone will tell me I can't own a gun. I'm afraid someone will tell me that, I can't say what I want to say.
Well, and the gun, and so like, take something like the gun debate, right? The fear is, I'm not going to have the opportunity to protect myself.
Exactly.
When I need to protect myself.
This helps me feel safe.
This makes me feel safe. Again, fear. And again, right or wrong, whatever, it doesn't matter what side you're on. The motivating factors of these things, or they're going to take away my right to get married.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to take away my right. They're going to take my job. Or take our jobs.
Take our jobs.
They're going to change something fundamental about my culture or my upbringing that I don't like. And some of these are very legitimate fears, and they may be, because we've seen it in other countries.
Sure.
We've seen these things be taken away. But what happens is that culture that's rooted in fear, again, as we saw in this episode, and what I think it's really trying to say is, as these fear components become so central, we start to go more and more to these extremes. We start to go to these periphery of society. The people those who are taking advantage of those things draw us away from the middle.
Well, they draw us away from each other
and that unifying concept.
Because together we are more powerful, and we think, oh, well, if I'm together with everybody that agrees with me, then I'm more powerful. But really, when we look at it, that separation of true culture, of true community that we are surrounded by, that separation of each other from each other is what causes the creation of these cults. You can't spell culture without the possibility of cult, right?
I like it.
Because when we get driven farther apart, we become more insecure about those who are different from us and who believe differently from us or who behave differently from us. We become more withdrawn into ourselves and our beliefs because we're desiring to feel secure again. And then we start to feel threatened by anything that threatens that secure feeling. So somebody who disagrees with us, instead of it just being a disagreement, it somehow becomes a threat, a possibility for victimization to occur to me. And I have already been victimized too much, which there's some validity there too. Absolutely. We do have some folks who have been victimized and who, through changes in our culture, maybe have not been able to appropriately acknowledge that and move through it. But it's that victimology mindset that somehow I'm going to be victimized or somehow I'm going to be marginalized that drives the separation between the two groups and drives that instinct to want to harm.
Well, it's not even like you can't, it's not that you just hold this viewpoint, but if you even say this viewpoint around me, you are victimized.
You're somehow threatened.
You are threatened by, we can't have a debate about it. We can't have a discussion about it. We can't try to find a common ground or a middle ground. These views have to be done away with. They have to be abolished. They have to be completely eradicated. And when there is no conversation, there is no debate, there is no discussion. It's now, your words are victimizing me. Your just the fact that you exist
is victimizing me,
is a problem. And that was what was going on in the season too, was we're going to get rid of anybody that we can get rid of that disagrees with us is okay.
Well, think about,
that's just part of that's just part of what we have to do, is get rid of
part of what has to
those
happen.
Beliefs.
And completely. That's how Kai gains a lot of trust and a lot of ground on these individuals who have some very strong personalities. Even is he takes the one thing that makes them feel vulnerable and victimized. He eliminates them. Yeah. He kills them. And so then they start to believe that, well, the only way to get rid of this discomfort of having to confront these fears,
these things I disagree with, these fears that
these things that I don't like problems, or that cause me discomfort, is to kill them.
So in the end, we start to think that. So at the very end of the season, we have Allie figuring out how to manipulate Kai and to get him basically put away, thrown in prison, right?
Well, Allie did the most self-serving thing, which was to kill her wife, to get rid of her wife, so she could protect.
Her wife had cheated on her and had abandoned her to this cult. And so she killed her wife. She got rid of her.
She protected Oz, then she destroyed Kai by making him obsolete
from the inside out.
Yeah.
And so she wins out right in the end. And we see Allie as this character, and she's talking to Oz, and everything's kind of getting back to normal. And she goes into politics and she becomes a senator. And at the very end, we see, we start to think that, that this Uber,
that everything's going to be right.
This uber liberal, I hit my microphone again. It's my turn. It's my turn to do that this episode, apparently. We start to think that the uber liberal, uber feminist character of Allie has won out, that she is, she starts to talk about all of the buzzwords, all of the, that her side kind of believes in, and she's all excited, and she's going to win out over this patriarchal, xenophobic mindset of Kai, right? Which is how we posit kind of the Hillary Trump. That's the culture has posited things in that way. But ultimately, that's not what happens. We realize in the end, in the final scene, that Allie's she's preparing for this meeting with other powerful women, as she tells Oz, right? Oh, I have to go meet with some of these other powerful women.
But not like Kai.
But not like Kai. And she's seated in front of a mirror, we see her putting on a green robe in the end and draping the hood over her head.
Very secret society.
The point is definitely that no matter what cult of identity we're identifying ourselves with, we're still selling ourselves to fear. We're still joining these extremist groups.
We're making ourselves susceptible to these extremist groups.
Whether it's a cult of gender, whether it's a cult of sexuality, whether it's a cult of race, whether ultimately these cults are all rooted in fear, no matter how well-intentioned. And in America, we have turned them all into various forms of fear-based, unbalanced extremism. No matter what side you're on, every one of these little groups has there's extremist sides of all of them. And the extremist sides are starting to become the mainstream sides. And that's something that is a fear of mine. That instills in me a lot of fear because we've always had this conversation, you and I, and I think this season really showed me something that I was not expecting. And I think what it showed me was that the real point of this season was we better get back to the middle somewhere, people, because no matter what side you're on, we're gravitating towards
extremism.
This fear-based society that is eventually going to end up in something bad.
Right.
Because it's this cult of personality. It's this cult of fear. It's this cult of, whatever it might be. The middle is the answer. The via media, the middle road, media. Moderation.
Well,
that's where we need to start the modern revolution, folks, right here.
Well, so that harkens back to that idea of the hive mind, right? Everybody coming together to do one purpose. Let's say just live, out of kindness, and everybody coming together. It's more eusocial. It's more cooperative. Hive mind is. However, there is a very slippery slope from that cooperative, eusocial, communicative, whether or not, I believe in the same thing as you. We're going to live cooperatively because that can happen.
Sure.
Instead, we go a little bit past that, and just past that is groupthink. Think Nazis. We're so afraid of anybody that has outside blood that we're willing to kill everyone off to ensure our safety.
Anybody that has an outside philosophy.
Anybody that
has
disagrees.
An outside,
because
that's
it's
not like me.
Because that scary. And how did somebody like that come to be when we know that the population in Germany did not all agree with that during that time, but somehow they were motivated to obey, whether or not they agreed with it, which is what we saw in Kai's cult, is that people were motivated to obey out of fear.
Well, and it's been, it's not, we always use Germany as our big example, but it's been example. Pol Pot, and it's been, Stalin, and it was
major,
all of these major, Mussolini, it was every single one of these major dictators used that as their,
and what did they promise? Basis, they promised safety.
Far left, far right, doesn't matter. They used those same tactics and those same fears as their foundation.
And everybody, working towards one task, one goal, feeling unified. That feels very
good.
Safe.
It feels good. It's very safe.
Very
safe. That's a good word for it. It's very safe.
And in every microcosm of our lives, we desire communion. And so at the same time, it's telling us commune with only people who feel safe.
Right.
When that is driving all of us farther from each other.
We need to commune with people who we disagree with and people who we don't have all of these common factors. And we need to learn
to feel safe in ourselves with that,
right,
and with each other again, because we are not safe with each other right now. No matter what you believe, no matter what race you are, we do not feel safe with each other intrinsically right now. And that there's something wrong with that, because we as humans live and survived for thousands of years because we communed with each other.
Well, it's a breakdown of community itself, because we commune now in our ideological groups. We commune now in and even in the times that we don't, say something community related, like your kid's school or your kid, you tend to be in the same socioeconomic,
you see the same people at the grocery store.
You
run into the same people.
But you don't know, most of the time you don't know your neighbors anymore. You don't know the people across the street. You don't know the people down the street. Whereas we used to have that community, right? Because it didn't matter whether, we may not have all agreed, but we were in community together.
We were still in the same vicinity. And even though we didn't agree, we still had each other's backs, and we don't.
And maybe that's just Maybe that's just idealized. Maybe that never really existed. Maybe it's always been this way.
But hasn't it had to? Because we had to survive in packs. Humans, look at us. We don't have any natural survival things except our instinct to survive. And in order to survive,
our brains help.
Well, that's
we're smarter than everybody else. Everything
over. Else. But I mean,
in some ways,
we have the instinct to survive because we're the only ones that realize that we're going to end. So
Right.
we have the instinct to survive very front and center, and we don't survive well on our own. We'd get cold, we'd starve, we'd be lonely. I mean, people die of loneliness. They die because they are without communion with another human being or another thing that makes them feel a part of something. And that is
filling the holes, right?
Filling the holes that we
we're
all
talking about the
feel.
So to bring this back around to
Yep.
I think trypophobia, I like that you saw that imagery that they used is more than just trying to instill.
It's not a disgust
It's a phobic
reaction.
thing.
It's a reaction that it's a depiction of what we feel inside, which is unwhole.
That there's these
Things
holes in
that we
all of us.
cannot fill.
Well, and also the holes in our ideologies. That
Mhm.
there's, that it doesn't matter.
And
It
all
doesn't
of our
matter
beliefs.
that what your belief is. There's going to be holes. There's problems with it. Nobody has it right 100% in that capacity, to the point where they can step on somebody else's beliefs or step on somebody else's viewpoints and say, this is the thing that you believe now, and we're going to make you do it by force.
Yeah.
Which is just something that's come up a lot lately that just frightens. You want to talk about fear? Frightens the shit out of me.
Handmaid's Tale.
In the Twitterfied universe, that we're living in, you can't be heard unless you're an extremist.
Mm-mm.
You can't be heard unless you're saying
not retweeted unless you're saying something controversial,
something over the top. And that's a really big bummer, and strangely enough, I really feel like that's the ultimate moral of this season. Of American Horror Story season 7. To bring that current reality kind of more to light. And it does it in a very non-partisan way, in a very non-ideological way.
It puts everybody on the spotlight to go, how are your beliefs affecting your behavior?
Yeah.
And does it need to?
Yeah, absolutely.
Do I need to believe all of these things like Allie does and also be in this cult that's trying to take over the world? Or can I just believe what I believe and try to behave from the best interest of the people because I am a public figure?
Well, and also in a spirit of love.
Yes,
that's
from a place of kindness.
Come from a place of kindness, and you'll find that your enemies are not always your enemies. You'll find that the people that you disagree with are not always the people that you have to butt heads with.
Sometimes those can be the closest people in your life.
Absolutely.
Because you butt heads with them. Because you're willing to challenge each other's vulnerabilities and still go, you know what? I fucking see you.
Yeah.
I see you still.
It's okay. We come from different places, but let's have a conversation.
And you know what that does? I just realized being able to do that plugs a hole in us. Being able to say, I see you. Even though I don't agree with you, I still see you. That fills something up inside of us that makes us go, I am okay. I am enough, because even though someone doesn't agree with what I'm saying, they can still go, I see you as a person. You're still here. You're still valid.
Absolutely. Horror movies and horror stuff. One of the reasons why I love it so much is, I've always been very, very into political science. I've always been very into theology, been into religion and history, and looking at history in the terms of, like we're talking about today, terms of ideology. History can be traced through our philosophies. History can be traced through our ideologies. And when you look at things through that lens, I think horror gives us that ability to
reflect,
to kind of reflect on our fears that way and reflect on our ideologies, because horror is one of the only genres that really puts a spotlight on it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I love it so much. And I think
it's the only thing that says confront this.
This is probably our deepest when it comes to
so deep.
And we didn't even have any sexual hole references.
That's because it was so deep.
But I think this is really an important thing for people to watch. And I think if you watch it with the lens of you trypophobics are going to have a hard time, but and you cholerophobics.
But maybe it will help. Maybe it will help identify,
it.
The holes inside of you that you subconsciously want and beg to be filled, but maybe aren't getting those from the right spot. Kai promises all this, stuff, but all their behaviors don't fill those holes in them. They don't fill that darkness, that void.
The metaphorical holes.
Holes.
It's really interesting to me that's kind of where it ended up, because it started out with, wow, they're just using a lot of marketing that's geared towards the trypophobics and geared towards the clowns.
It started out real glitter. And I think that's one of the things that I wanted to mention was the glitter story. You know, when I had the roller derby girls over here and we were making glitter signs and you came home and you were kind of grouchy and you fussed at me for all the glitter. And we had
after they all left, there was just glitter everywhere. And I was like, God, fucking glitter. Stupid. Why'd you have to have this thing here? Just got all pissed off.
Big argument about glitter, right? And then it ended up not actually being about the glitter.
Yeah, there was something else going on.
Something else that I don't even remember.
I don't even remember either, but then we said it wasn't about, I think we even,
it's not about the glitter.
Me or you
Somebody
said that straight out. Like it wasn't about the glitter. And that's become a phrase that we've used in our
lives. What I use it in therapy
all the time.
You know, I've made up a story in therapy about it that I tell because for a while I forgot that was the actual story. I was like, somehow it came up. So I'll just tell it like this.
Yeah.
But the reason I say that is because that is the function that this extremism in our society and this polarization in society serves. It serves as the glitter to distract us from what's really going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that was an interesting episode. I really enjoyed that. It was really kind of fun to take it from what the actual phobia was, like the actual fear of these little concentric holes that I know many of you deal with. And, you know, you're going to see a lot more images this week as we discuss this.
Yeah.
To kind of this metaphorical thing, metaphorical holes
that we all seek
in our
to
culture,
fill.
in our lives, and in our ideologies and our beliefs. I think it's really fascinating.
There's a lot more here.
There's a book there somewhere.
There's a lot more here that we need to uncover. It's been a really easy 2 weeks trying to kind of piece everything together, and you know, it's been fun.
Well,
been fun feeling holes with you.
Filling those holes.
Filling those holes. Filling those holes. Feeling those holes. Filling those holes. Bowl and bull. Fill and full. Okay.
Get all those holes filled.
Fill all those holes.
Oh yeah, baby. Fill them all. All right. Well, I don't know what we're doing next week. What's our plan?
I don't know. We have to decide. It'll be a surprise.
Yeah, I had some ideas. I can't remember what they were though. So we'll make it a surprise, I guess, for the next episode. But that's Trypophobia, guys. That was fun. I enjoyed that.
Thanks for going on this adventure.
Let's definitely end with think about. I think there needs to be a little bit of like a call to action here, because I think it really brings to light so much that we get so fired up. You know, things that we would say to somebody on Twitter, we don't say to them, we would never say to their face.
Mm-mm.
And I think that's one of those things we go to these extremes. And then we realize, I think a lot of times we step back, at least I know I do. I step back and I go, gosh, is that really what I believe? Or am I just trying to is there just something in me that has to spew my ideology?
Spew.
Is
there something in me that feels afraid?
Yeah. It just comes from that place of fear and that place of ego too. Just this central theme of just like, I have to
be right.
This has to be, I have to protect this thing. And it's so important, but really, I mean, is it that important?
Is it really?
Or is there a way that we can reach across and have some common ground?
Can you just, can I hold my thing and can you hold yours?
Right.
Instead of like me having to throw your thing away and hand you mine. Like, why can't we just, cool, you do that and I'll do this and we'll just like hang out.
Yep. It's important. So thanks, Kris.
Thanks, honey.
I hadn't really thought about that much. I mean, I thought about parts of that, but the whole part of it I thought was really interesting. Like the hive mindset and the way that episode was really talking about that as a theme.
Operating as a
metaphorical
hive
theme
is very different than, groupthink.
Well, Feardos, please share our stuff on social media. We really like doing this podcast and we would love to see it grow some more. So we can do more things with it. And we would love to see you sharing it on your social media and maybe going over, and we would really, really, really appreciate it if you would just give us like some love on your podcast apps and like and share and comment and give us a review. Our social media has been growing. We've definitely had more interaction and we really appreciate it. And we love, guys, we are so excited when you guys like actually say, hey, like, I really love that episode.
Like Cody.
Give us an example. Or like Cody in Iowa, who gave us a really awesome review and new to podcasts.
The best, Cody.
We're super stoked that that Cody's diving into
stickers are on the way, Cody.
Yeah. I sent out some stickers to you, Cody. So, and if anybody wants stickers, just send me a message on Twitter or something and I'll get them out to you right away. We love that you're listening, and we really appreciate it. Thanks, Feardos. And until next time,
stay afraid. Stay very afraid.